Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Jackie Van Ham, your girl in the know for all things motorcycle with your garage talk. Although technically I'm obviously not in my garage. I am at home. I'm not gonna lie, it is very, very warm out, and I have my brother coming over here in about 45 minutes because we're gonna take a photo together. It's my dad's birthday, so I'm headed up there on Sunday, and I wanted to get a photo of us to put in a frame and take to him as a gift. I'm not gonna spoil it for him because he literally does not get on the internet, does not understand computers, does not even have a smartphone. So anyway, so I needed to do my show today while I was at home in the air conditioning and getting ready to do that picture with my brother. So I figured that I would go ahead though and continue on with our Fun Fact Friday, our garage talk. Last week we talked about drivetrain. We discussed the several types of final drive options that are available. Of course, chain, belt, shaft drive. Go check that show out if you missed it. They always live here on this Choppertown Facebook page. Or you can go like my page, Jackie Van Ham Official, here on the Facebooks, and I scoot them all over there immediately when I get done here, and that way they're all in one nice, tidy, contained place. Give me a like while you're over there and go check out those shows. We've covered several types of engine basics, but I try to throw a couple curveballs in there to keep it interesting for my more advanced watchers, you know. But I know that there's an awful lot of new motorcyclists coming to the sport, in particular this year, with the whole Corona COVID shenanigans that's happening globally. I don't know if you're aware of this or not. I do mention this a lot on the show, but motorcycle sales are through the roof right now. Everybody has decided, you know, because we're kind of trapped at home and we need some fun stuff to do and we need to recreate, but a lot of stuff is closed. So there's no more perfect way to recreate than with power sports, right? Because you can be together with your family, but you can be kind of alone. You can go have fun. It still is riding, even though there's no rallies to go to, kind of, although Sturgis is in 2 weeks. Anyway, so there's a lot of new motorcyclists. So I am continuing on with my little bit of engine basics and garage theme show, you know, to answer some questions, maybe clear up some mystery out there. As always, I can see your comments, so feel free to peek in and say hello. And so for today, I figured, you know, we covered drivetrain, and then there's a second type of drive out there that you may or may not be familiar with, and that is your primary drive, particularly for my V-twin folks. Of course, I'm sure you are one. Primary drive is a whole nother ball of wax, and it gets into transmission as well. I'm not going to go into the transmission today because that's its own whole huge show, and I'm going to hopefully do that next week at the shop because I have some transmission gears and things to show you. Anyway, that's jumping ahead of myself. For today, we're just going to kind of touch on the basics of your primary drive and what the hell is it and why does it matter? So thank you so much for tuning in. Go ahead, hit that share button with your friends because I kind of guarantee that I'm going to have some new information for any of you watching. So tune in, share this video. We appreciate it, and let's get started. So the very first slide on your page is going to be showing, of course, a Harley-Davidson. And in case you're wondering what that huge chrome panel on the left-hand side of your bike is, this is your primary. Primary drive is what transfers the rotation of the engine's crankshaft to the transmission, which in turn transfers it to the wheel. To get you started, here's a look at various types of primary drives. This is a photo of a Harley-Davidson Softail. As you can see, it is a closed type. In fact, it is covered with this metal plate because it uses a chain that is lubricated. Imagine the mess of having this open. Below, or next, you can see a photo of a Harley-Davidson Sportster's primary, along with the engine and the transmission laid open on the workbench. So you can see those great big connecting rods towards the top and left-hand side of your screen. Those are what connects to your pistons, and then those are what pump up and down as the engine is firing, and those turn that crank, which is at the left-hand side. So they're turning that crank. It is connected to a belt, which in turn is connected to your transmission. All of that is contained with that big chrome panel because all of that is in its own lubricated bath. You know, anytime you have any sort of chains and gears and all this kind of stuff slinging around, it has to be lubricated for a couple of different reasons. The main one being is it helps dissipate heat. Lubrication helps move that heat off of those parts, which in turn hopefully gives them a little bit more extended life. Nowadays, a very common type Nowadays, a very common type among long, fat choppers is this so-called open type, which is using a belt instead of a chain, and it looks like this. So maybe you've seen this floating around on some more custom type machines. This is not coming from factory, obviously, because it has that huge belt wide open, waiting to catch or snag your pants or shoes or fingers or hands. These can be a little bit dangerous, but are super wicked and kick-ass looking, right? And watching them flip around and spin around is really rad. It just gives this very cool vibe, as well as, they swapped this out now. That once was chain driven and was enclosed, and now it's like exposed to the elements. It's got that belt hanging out there. And then the belt in turn, as we discussed on the previous show, on last week's show, we touched into a little bit the pros and cons of belts versus chains versus shaft drive. So again, make sure you go check out that show in case you missed it. But the quick and dirty of it is that there's a little bit more flexibility in chains as far as changing them, repairing them. They're generally speaking a little bit easier when they are open as part of your final drive. However, when they're trapped in that case, it gets a little bit more complicated to repair them, fix them. But in theory, they don't need as much repair because they're enclosed and they're always lubricated and they're protected. So there's a lot of different schools of thought here. And the belts, generally speaking, are much they're much longer lasting, is the way I should say that. So that's also a reason for switching these out from chains to belts, whether it's your primary or your final. Both of them have the opportunity to be changed around. Now, can it be kind of complicated if it doesn't come from factory that way? Yes, but if you're a custom bike builder, this is what you do. This is the name of the game. So let's go back to that belt and take a gander at it again. That belt is open. That is loose like that. It does not have a cover. The first type that was using the chain is the first slide I showed you is the most common on stock bikes. There are numerous reasons behind this. First of all, it's more secure, well lubricated behind the primary cover, and it's sealed, but it produces more noise. However, in this type, the clutch is also inside the primary drive. The overall installation process should be considered complicated. Like I said, this is not really for beginners. The belt drive, though, it makes less noise and is very straightforward to install. Also, you don't have to lubricate it and adjust it from time to time. On the downside, it can overheat easier, depending on its size, might be uncomfortable for everyday riding. It's usually cheaper than the chain, but doesn't perform well with high torque engines, and they require riders' attention, mostly to not catch his or her clothes since they are open. This next slide I'm going to show you is just the very basic, very, very, very basic ideas of what's happening between these kind of three rotating, I'm going to call them pulleys, as it were, pulleys or sprockets or gears. All three of them are contained within this schematic. So the very first one you're going to see on the left-hand side is the rotating gear coming from the engine. Now it's turning, and in turn it's connected first to your transmission. That is your primary drive. Then the next connection is from the transmission back to that rear wheel, back to either whether it's going to be a sprocket if it's chain driven, or if it's a belt, it's going to be a contained, like a belt drive. So there's two different ways that these are all spinning, but they're all connected together. They're all dependent on one another. Any of these can be changed, however. Now, again, it gets complicated to do so, but you can change them in order to change the way the power goes to the rear wheel from the engine. The V-twin drivetrain includes the primary drive, transmission, and secondary or final drive. The entire drivetrain is designed to transmit power from the engine to the rear wheel while providing gear reduction to keep the engine in its optimum power band. They're showing the primary drive on this motorcycle is going to be that Kevlar belt. The large chain going again from that transmission to the rear wheel is the final drive. So this is a belt primary chain final drive bike. The primary drive consists of an engine output sprocket, which is attached to the crankshaft, clutch assembly, and then the roller chain or belt and usually a housing that encloses the entire assembly. The purpose of the clutch is to engage the primary drive to the transmission. So this is how the primary drive basically talks to the final rear wheel, is the transmission. It's how they communicate that power from the engine to the rear wheel. They have to go through that transmission. That's just going to be a slide. I thought that this was really clever, showing you that primary drive that is a belt open primary. But look at the cool guard they made. They attached a chain over it in an attempt to kind of keep your clothes or your pants or your shoes out of it. I thought that that was pretty clever, so I threw it in there. The secondary drive includes the transmission output sprocket or pulley, belt or roller chain, and rear wheel sprocket or pulley. Changing drivetrain gear ratios at the rear wheel is usually easier than at the transmission or primary drive. So again, as we discussed on last week's show, So as we discussed on last week's show, if you want to change the way that your bike puts power to the ground, one of the more straightforward ways of doing it is changing your rear sprocket if you have a chain-driven rear wheel. In order to increase torque or power in the bottom end, you increase the sprocket size. The bigger, it's easier to think. The way that I think about it is the higher or bigger this sprocket goes, the more the low end power. The smaller the sprocket goes, the more high end power. Just it's a little bit of an inverse, but that's the easy way that I remember it. But it's one of the absolute easiest ways to change the way your bike puts power to the ground. However, it is not without its pros and cons. Again, it really depends on what you're using your motorcycle for. If you are a big highway dog and you go, 80, 90 miles per hour for hours and hours and hours on end, making the sprocket be bigger so it has more bottom end does not help you. It's going to end up reducing the amount your wheel can spin, your RPMs. It kind of changes all of that. It changes the dynamics of that. So it doesn't want to spool up quite as much. It puts a little bit more stress on those parts. In that case, you'd want to leave it stock. Or, especially if for more performance people that like racers and things of that nature, you want to make your sprockets go down. Just a quick way to think about that. But again, I got a little bit more into that final drive conversation on last week's show, so make sure you go check that out. A way, however, for V-twin folks in particular to change their ratio is using something like this next slide. So this is going to be a bit of this is an entire transmission change out. Here is a big twin 6-speed overdrive transmission with the main shaft and counter shaft attached to the trap door. This internal transmission ratios are changed by replacing 2 or more transmission gears. This is Jim's USA, Baker drivetrain. There's plenty of aftermarket options for this. This can also be a swap, but again, this is going to get into our transmission conversation, and that's going to be on a later show. I just wanted to show you this slide real fast. However, with the 6-speed overdrive transmission, that changes again. I'll get into that on a later show, so I'll stop that. But there is an abundance of performance options for V-twin. It is easy to spend a small fortune on building a stout engine. Unfortunately, drivetrain gearing is often overlooked when making performance modifications, but it is crucial if your bike is to perform well during stop-and-go riding and highway jamming. Understanding a few basic principles about your bike's drivetrain will help get the engine's power to the ground where it really counts and will make stop-and-go riding or occasional bursts down the road more enjoyable. Again, the V-twin's drivetrain is divided into 3 distinct assemblies: primary drive, transmission, and secondary or final drive. The primary drive consists of an engine output sprocket, or referred to as a pulley, attached to the crankshaft, clutch assembly, roller chain or belt, and housing that encloses the entire thing. So again, this slide is showing you some different options and some different ways that this looks. This is going to have teeth, so it's referring to the engine. The 32T is the amount of teeth on that very first, the clutch. Then you're going to be getting into your gearbox, and then the gearbox to the final drive. These are the different steps along your transmission, the way that it makes power from the engine all the way to the rear wheel. This also discusses how you can figure out your drive ratios. Again, a way to think about that is whenever you make the teeth go up, the power changes to more low-end torque type power. When the teeth go down, it's more high free spinning RPM, so more high performance type power, more high speed type power, like highway type power. So what do you guys think about that for today's show? Just a real quick conversation. I know I just was kind of loosely putting a couple little bits of information out there. It does get very complicated, and especially once we start talking about transmission, then that gets into a whole different ball of wax. But I'm going to put together that show for you, and maybe that'll be next week's program. I was looking up some slides earlier today, and I realized that's got to be a second show. That's got to be a two-parter for today. Like I said, I am in a little bit of a hurry today. I just wanted to jump on real quick and just kind of extend off of last week's conversation about final drives and talk a little bit about primary drives this time, and what the hell is that and what does that mean. So as always, thank you so much for tuning in. Everybody have a lovely weekend no matter where you are out there in the world. As always, to all of our overseas viewers, thank you for tuning in. Hola, ¿cómo está? Konnichiwa, guten tag, bonjour, and buongiorno to all of our overseas viewers. I hope you have a lovely weekend. Please do ride safe, stay safe, and keep an eye out, because people out there are not looking for you, man. Folks are not used to driving or haven't been traveling a lot, and I know a lot of you bikers are starting to hit the road and go do cool camping trips and go do stuff like that. Please do be safe. Watch in front of you, watch behind you, keep all of your eyeballs going, and have a great weekend no matter where you are out there in the world. I'll be back next week on Wednesday. My Wednesday show, I think, is going to be a Sturgis show, because Sturgis is starting to firm up. Some events are starting to be laid out, schedules are starting to come together, things are starting to happen, internet gossip, all sorts of stuff is happening. So I'll be sure to bring that up on next Wednesday's show. So make sure you hit that notifications on button. You are not going to want to miss it. Feel free to give me a follow over on the Instagrams. I'm at Jacqui Van Ham, or at the Jacqui of all trades. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. My show partner, Vroom, retract, vac, it totally sucks, and it's supposed to. Pick up a shirt and support the show at twostroketees.com. The All Things Motorcycle podcast is up and running. It is over at Buzzsprout, so feel free to go check that out. And of course, thanks to each and every one of you for tuning in here at Choppertown. I could not do it without you, so thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. Let's go back through and say hello to some of you in the comments. I know that was a lot of talking. Hey, Billy in Milwaukee, what's going on up there? I hope it is cooler up there than it is here. Woo! It is hot and humid. Moses from Daytona, one of our regular viewers, thank you for tuning in. Christian, thank you for watching. Steve Davis and all of our motorcycle riders in Maine, thank you for tuning in. Dan Benson from Tennessee, what's going on down there? Sven from Denmark, what's going on? Thanks for tuning in. Dennis, just keep your limbs out of there. Yeah, definitely keep your limbs out of that open drive. Carl, what's going on? Carl's one of my in real life real friends out there. What's going on, buddy? Welcome to the show. I think you've got a show going on later today. I thought I saw that you're going to be a guest. Thanks as always for tuning in, everybody. And if you are